Greetings, everybody. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lord of Warcraft. We are here, the final chapter of the Lord of the Clans, and this is our actual last full-length novel before we're into World of Warcraft material. So we're getting real close to starting to play Warcraft 3, and there's some things. Honestly, it's a lot of comics, but there will be a little bit of lore. Chronicles always, as you know. Chronicles is going to be with us all the way until we finish Cataclysm. Won't be till after that really the lore starts to shift and slow down, and that part will come out of it. All right, so we left off with Taratha beheaded, Thrall just going elemental on the base, them charging. Durnhold's own men are like, yeah, she's a drunken psychopath. Things look bad, look grim. The orcs are rampaging. So we're going to find out how this goes in this final chapter of Chapter 20 of Lord of the Clans. Stay a while and listen. The sky seemed to open and a sheet of rain poured down, plastering Blackmoore's dark hair to his skull and making him slip in the suddenly slick mud of the courtyard. He fell hard, and the wind was knocked out of him. He forced himself to scramble to his feet and continue. There was only one way out of this bloody, noisy hell. He reached his quarters and dove for his desk. With trembling fingers, he searched for the key. He dropped it twice before he was able to stumble to the tapestry beside his bed, tear the weaving down, and insert the key into the lock. Blackmoore plunged forward, forgetting about the steps and hurtling down them. He was so inebriated that his body was limp as a rag doll's, however, and suffered only a few bruises. That is true. That happens. That's how these drunk people survive these crashes, and their victims don't. The light shining in the door from his quarters reached only a few yards, and up ahead yawned utter darkness. He should have brought a lamp, but it was too late now. Too late for so many things. He began to run as fast as his legs would carry him. The door on the other side would still be unbolted. He could escape, could flee into the forest, and return later when the killing was over and feign. He didn't know. Something. The earth trembled again, and Blackmoore was knocked off his feet. Oh, remember Taratha had her fear that this whole tunnel would fall on her? I wonder if that's about to happen. I wonder if that was some foreshadowing. He felt small bits of stone and earth dust him, and when the quake ceased, he eased himself up and moved forward, arms extended. Dust flew thickly, and he coughed violently. A few feet ahead, his fingers encountered a huge pile of stone. The tunnel had collapsed in front of him. For a few wild moments, Blackmoore tried to claw his way out, then sobbing, he fell to the ground. What now? What was to become of Adelis Blackmoore now? Again, the earth shook, and Blackmoore sprang to his feet and began to race back the way he had come. Guilt and fear were strong, but the instinct to survive was stronger. A terrible noise rent the air, and Blackmoore realized with a jolt of horror that the tunnel was again collapsing right behind him. Terror lent him speed, and he sprinted back toward his quarters, the roof of the tunnel missing him by a foot or two, as if it was following his path a mere step behind. He stumbled up the stairs and hurled himself forward just as the rest of the tunnel came down with a mighty crash. Blackmoore clutched the rushes on the floor as if they could offer some solidity in this suddenly mad world. The terrible shaking of the earth seemed to go on and on. Finally it ended. He didn't move, just lay with his face to the stone floor, gasping. A sword came out of nowhere to clang to a stop inches from his nose. Shrieking, Blackmoore scuttled back. He looked up to see Thrall standing in front of him, a sword in his own hand. Light preserve him, but Blackmoore had forgotten just how big Thrall was. Clad in black plate armor, wielding a massive sword, he seemed to tower over the prone figure of Blackmoore like a mountain towers over the landscape. Had he always had that set to his huge deformed jaw, that presence? Thrall, Blackmoore stammered. I can't explain. No, said Thrall, with a calmness that frightened Blackmoore more than rage would have. You can't explain. There is no explanation. There is only a battle, long in the coming, a duel to the death. Take the sword. Blackmoore drew his legs up beneath him. Oh, I... Take the sword, repeated Thrall, his voice deep, or I shall run you through where you sit, like a frightened child. Blackmoore reached out a trembling hand and closed it about the hilt of the sword. Good, thought Thrall. At least Blackmoore was going to give him the satisfaction of fighting. The first person he had gone for was Langston. It had been ease itself to intimidate the young lord into revealing the existence of the subterranean escape tunnel. Pain had sliced through Thrall afresh as he realized that this must have been the way Taratha had managed to sneak out to see him. He had called the earthquakes to seal the tunnel so that Blackmoore would be forced to return by this same path. While he waited, he had moved the furniture angrily out of the way to clear a small area for this final confrontation. He stared as Blackmoore stumbled to his feet. Was this really the same man he had adored and feared simultaneously as a youngster? It was hard to believe. This man was an emotional and physical wreck. The vague shadow of pity swept through Thrall again, but he would not permit it to blot out the atrocities that Blackmoore had committed. Come for me, Thrall snarled. Blackmoore lunged. He was quicker and more focused than Thrall had expected given his condition, and Thrall actually had to react quickly to avoid being struck. He parried the blow and waited for Blackmoore to strike again. The conflict seemed to revitalize the master of Durnhold. Something like anger and determination came into his face, and his moves were steadier. He feinted left and battered hard on Thrall's right. Even so, Thrall blocked effectively. Now he pressed his own attack, surprised and a bit pleased that Blackmoore was able to defend himself and only suffered a slight grazing on his unprotected left side. Blackmoore realized his weakness and looked about for anything that could serve as a shield. Grunting, Thrall tore the door off its hinges and tossed it to Blackmoore. Hide behind the coward's door, he cried. The door, while it would have made a fine shield for an orc, was of course too large for Blackmoore. He shoved it aside angrily. It's still not too late, Thrall, he said, shocking the orc. You can join with me, and we can work together. Of course, I'll free the other orcs, if you'll promise that they'll fight for me under my banner, just as you will. Thrall was so furious he didn't defend himself properly as Blackmoore unexpectedly lunged. He didn't get his sword up in time, and Blackmoore's blade clanged off the armor. It was a clean blow, and the armor was all that stood between Thrall and injury. You are still drunk, Blackmoore. If you believe for an instant I can forget the sight of... Again Thrall saw red, the recollection of Taratha's blue eyes staring at him almost more than he could bear. He had been holding back, trying to give Blackmoore at least a fighting chance, but now he threw that to the wind. With the impassive rage of a tidal wave crashing upon a seacoast city, Thrall bore down on Blackmoore. With each blow, each cry of rage, he relived his tormented youth at this man's hands. As Blackmoore's sword flew from his fingers, Thrall saw Taratha's face, the friendly smile that enveloped human and orc alike, and saw no difference between them. And when he had beaten Blackmoore into a corner, and that wreck of a man had seized a dagger from his boot and shoved it up toward Thrall's face, narrowly missing the eye, Thrall cried out for vengeance and brought his sword slicing down. Blackmoore didn't die at once. He lay gasping, fingers impotently clutching his sides as blood pumped out in a staggering rush of red. He stared up at Thrall, his eyes glazed. Blood trickled from his mouth. To Thrall's astonishment, he smiled. You're what I made you. I am so proud, he said, and then sagged against the wall. Thrall stepped out of the keep into the courtyard. Driving rain pelted him. At once Hellscream splashed up to him. Report, demanded Thrall, even as his eyes swept the scene. We have taken Durnhold, my war chief, said Hellscream. He was spattered with blood and looked ecstatic, his red eyes burning bright. Reinforcements for the humans are still leagues distant. Most of those who have offered resistance are under our control. We have almost completed searching the keep and are removing those who did not come to fight. The females and their young are unharmed, as you asked. Thrall saw clusters of his warriors surrounding groups of human males. They were seated in the mud, glaring up at their captors. Now and then one would rally, but he was quickly put in his place. Thrall noticed that although the orcs seemed to want very badly to assault their prisoners, none did. Find me Langston, Hellscream hastened to do Thrall's bidding, and Thrall went from cluster to cluster. The humans were either terrified or belligerent, but it was clear who had control of Durnhold now. He turned as Hellscream returned, driving Langston in front of him with well-timed prods from his sword. At once, Langston dropped to his knees in front of Thrall. Vaguely disgusted, Thrall ordered him to rise. "You are in command now, I assume."
"Well, Sergeant... Yes. Yes, I am."
"I have a task for you, Langston." Thrall bent down so that the two were face to face. "You and I know what sort of betrayal you and Blackmoore were plotting. You were going to turn traitor to your alliance. I'm offering you a chance to redeem yourself, if you'll take it." Langston's eyes searched his, and a bit of fear left his face. He nodded.
"What would you have me do?"
"Take a message to your alliance. Tell them what has happened this day. Tell them that if they choose the path of peace, they will find us ready to engage in trade and cooperation with them, provided they free the rest of my people and surrender land, good land, for our use. If they choose the path of war, they will find an enemy the likes of which they have never seen. You thought we were strong 15 years past. That is as nothing to the foe they will face on the battlefield today. You have had the good fortune to survive 2 battles with my army. You will, I am sure, be able to properly convey the full depths of the threat we will pose to them." Langston had gone pale beneath the mud and blood on his face, but he continued to meet Thrall's eyes evenly. "Give him a horse and provisions," said Thrall, convinced his message had been understood. "Langston is to ride unhindered to his betters. I hope for the sake of your people that they listen to you. Now go." Hellscream grabbed Langston by the arm and led him to the stables. Thrall saw that, per his instructions, his people, who were not occupied with guarding the humans, were busily taking provisions from the keep. Horses, cattle, sheep, sacks of grain, bedding for bandages, all the things an army needed would soon be provided to the new horde. There was one more man he needed to talk to, and after a moment he found him. Sergeant's small group of men had not surrendered their weapons, but neither were they actually using them. It was a standoff, with both orcs and humans armed, but neither particularly desirous of escalating the conflict. Sergeant's eyes narrowed warily when he saw Thrall approach. The circle of orcs parted to admit their war chief. For a long moment, Sergeant and Thrall regarded one another. Then, faster than even Sergeant had credited him for, Thrall's hand was on Sergeant's earlobe, the golden hoop firmly between his thick green fingers. Then, just as swiftly, Thrall released him, leaving the earring where it was. "You taught me well, Sergeant," Thrall rumbled.
"You were a fine student, Thrall,"
Sergeant replied cautiously. "Blackmoore is dead," said Thrall. "Your people are being led from the fortress and its provisions taken, even as we speak. Durnhold stands now, only because I will it to stand." To illustrate his point, he stamped once on the ground and the earth shook violently. "You taught me the concept of mercy. At this moment you should be very glad of that lesson. I intend to level Durnhold in a few moments. Your reinforcements will not arrive in time to be of any help to you. If your men will surrender, they and their families will be permitted to leave. We will see to it that you have food and water, even weapons. Those who do not surrender will die in the rubble. Without this fortress and its knights to protect the camps, we will find it easy to liberate the rest of our people. That was always my only goal."
"Was it?"
Sergeant said. Thrall knew he was thinking of Blackmoore. "Justice was my goal," said Thrall, "and that has and will be served."
"Do I have your word that no one will come to harm?"
"You do," said Thrall, lifting his head to look at his people. "If you offer us no resistance, you will be permitted to walk out freely." For answer, Sergeant tossed his weapon to the muddy earth. There was a silence, and then the armed men did likewise. The battle was over. When everyone, human and orc, was safely away from the fortress, Thrall called upon the spirit of earth. "This place serves nothing good. It housed prisoners who had done no wrong, elevated evil to great power. Let it fall. Let it fall. He spread out his arms and began to stamp rhythmically on the earth. Closing his eyes, Thrall remembered his tiny cell, Blackmoore's torture, the hatred and contempt in the eyes of the men he had trained with. The memories were shockingly painful as he sifted through them, reliving them briefly before letting them go. Let it fall. Let it fall, the earth rumbled for the final time in this battle. The sound was ear-splitting as the mighty stone buildings were pulverized. Earth churned upward almost as if it was eating the fortress. Down it came, the symbol to Thrall of everything he had fought against. When the earth was at last still, all that was left of the mighty Durnhold was a pile of rocks and jagged pieces of wood. A huge cheer went up from the orcs. The humans, haggard and haunted, simply stared. In that pile somewhere was Adelis Blackmoore's body.
Until you bury him in your heart, you won't be able to bury him deep enough,
came a voice by his side. Thrall turned to look at Drekthar. You are wise, Drekthar, said Thrall. Perhaps too wise.
Is it good to kill him?
Thrall thought before answering.
It needed to be done, he said. Blackmoore was poison, not just to me, but to so many others.
He hesitated.
Before I killed him, he said that he was proud of me, that I was what he had made me. Drekthar, the thought appalls me. Of course, you are what Blackmoore made you,
Drekthar replied, surprising and sickening Thrall with the answer. Gently, Drekthar touched Thrall's armor-clad arm.
And you are what Taratha made you, and Sergeant, and Hellscream, and Doomhammer, and I, and even Snowsong. You are what each battle made you, and you are what you have made of yourself, the Lord of the clans.
He bowed, then turned and left, guided by his attendant Halkar. Thrall watched them go. He hoped that one day he would be as wise as Drekthar. Hellscream approached.
The humans have been given food and water, my war chief. Our outriders report that the human reinforcements will shortly be closing in. We should leave.
In a moment. I have a duty for you to perform. He extended a closed fist to Hellscream, then opened it. A silver necklace with a crescent moon dropped into Hellscream's outstretched hand. Find the humans called Foxton. It is likely that they have only now learned about their daughter's murder. Give this to them and tell them that I grieve with them. Hellscream bowed, then left to do Thrall's bidding. Thrall took a deep breath. Behind him was his past, the one that had once been Durnhold the Ruin. Before him was his future. A sea of green, his people, waiting, expectant.
Today,
he cried, raising his voice so that all could hear.
Today our people have won a great victory. We have leveled the mighty fortress Durnhold and broken its grasp on the encampments. But we cannot yet rest, nor claim that we have won this war. There are many of our brothers and sisters who yet languish in prisons, but we know that they will soon be free. They, like you, will taste what it is to be an orc, to know the passion and power of our proud race. We are undefeatable. We will triumph because our cause is just. Let us go and find the camps and smash their walls and free our people.
A huge cheer rose up, and Thrall looked around at the thousands of proud, beautiful, orcish faces. Their mouths were open and their fists were waving, and every line of their large bodies spoke of joy and excitement. He recalled the sluggish creatures in the encampment and felt a stab of almost painful pleasure as he allowed himself to realize that he had been the one to inspire them to these heights. The thought was humbling. A profound peace swept over him as he watched his people cry his name. After so many years of searching, he finally knew where his true destiny lay, knew deep in his bones who he was. Thrall, son of Duratan, war chief of the Horde. He had come home. Cool. That's pretty sweet. I like that story, and since we're never going to get to play the game that was canceled, the Lord of the Clans that was really going through a lot of this is a good bridge of gap that leads us to Warcraft 3, which we're getting super close to. So we're going to, next couple episodes, we'll just wrap things up with this period right before the Third War by finishing the first chapter of Chronicles. And then we have Metzin's novella. It's one of the only things, if not the only thing, that we're going to read, unless maybe there's some short stories by him. It's like a little 8-chapter thing. So that'll take us, so that gives us 10 more episodes before we get to officially being in the Third War. And of course, we're going to have we might not start the game right away because we have some things. I'll have to do some research, and we'll have some Chronicles. We'll have some, the second part of the Wrath of the Lich King, not the Wrath of the Lich King, the Arthas Rise of the Lich King. Maybe a couple short stories. So we'll have some things that'll be sprinkled in there. But we're ready and locked and loaded. I think it's going to be cool to play that third game. We're going to play the reforged version. That'll be neat. All right, so if we're just glancing at the about the author, just going through it, she's written that's at this point in time. She's written 18 novels and 16 short stories. That number is probably up. I'm not sure, but she's obviously the person that they tapped to write many, and I don't know, you might disagree, but I think she's the best one that we've read of these early legends for Warcraft. I think that's cool, that TSR, now Wizards of the Coast, which owns D&D, the Ravenloft used to be one of the main, campaign settings. So that's kind of cool that her book, Vampire of the Mists, in 1991 created that entire campaign setting. Very cool. Jander Sunstar is a famous character, vampire character. She had a couple more novels, Vampire, Dance of the Dead, Enemy Within. I think that's cool that she's written some Star Trek Voyager novels. I love Star Trek. I'm a nerd for that too. So Star Trek Voyager is cool. Including the popular Dark Matters trilogy, so that is in that. And she did a novelization addendum to the Voyager Endgame finale. That's cool. So that makes me feel like this is about the time Voyager ended. So that takes us. So this is probably right around this time, 1999. So she's obviously had 22 more years to write some more. So she's going to continue writing them, even though it's off the air. So she really likes that. So she cranks the books out. So she mostly writes tie-in work, but she has written 2 original novels, Kingsman and Thief, Instrument of Fate, and 89.99 under a pen name Jadrian Bell. Weird. And she won Best Genre Novel. That's all cool. She lives in Denver. Her husband's a portrait artist. How do you make a living being a portrait artist? Is that photography? Do you paint them? 2 cats and a white German Shepherd. Weird. All right, all that's pretty cool. That's it for this novel. We finished it. We got another novel in the pipe. 5x5, another episode in that pipe too. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I had a good time with this one. I liked it. And I will see everybody next time on Lore of Warcraft. Thank you for watching.